Hello, wherever you are. Welcome to the Riga Security Forum podcast series. This particular podcast is dedicated to climate and energy security. My name is Reinis Āboltiņš. I'll be the moderator of the conversation. I'm a doctoral student researcher at the Riga Technical University, energy expert, and may I welcome three outstanding participants of this podcast who will be at the center of the focus and attention for the next roughly 35-40 minutes. So let me warmly welcome Carole Mathieu, Head of EU Policies, Center for Energy and Climate, the French Institute of International Relations. Welcome, Carole.
Thank you. Good morning.
Welcome, warm welcome also to Kira Vinke, Head of Center for Climate and Foreign Policy, German Council on Foreign Relations, and also scientist at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. Welcome, Kira.
Thank you very much. Good day.
And last but not least, warm welcome also to Edmunds Cepurītis, who is a Riga City Council councillor. He is also the head of the Committee on Housing and Environment. Welcome, Edmunds.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Great to have all three of you. I'll try to let you speak and let myself only moderate the discussion and lead the discussion and ask some questions. So although this will be as a dynamic conversation as possible, I have prepared a few talking points, and one thing which I would like to begin with, just to set the level playing field for all the discussants. When we speak about climate and energy security, how do we interpret really the concept of climate and energy security? May I first turn to Carole then?
Yes. Well, I think the starting point of our discussion is that we have to reinvent the way we produce energy and the way we consume energy in Europe, and that's because we have this joint commitment within the European Union to really engage in the low carbon transition and reach carbon neutrality by 2050. So that's our joint commitment, and all member states are behind this objective, I think. And maybe we have picked up the low-hanging fruits over the past decade, and now it's clear that when we discuss 2030, we have to go through systematic changes. And of course, I think it requires that we rethink the concept of a security of supply, because clearly the destination is an improvement in terms of security of supply. It's well known. If you switch from the dependence on fossil fuels to renewables, low carbon sources, then it's clearly an improvement. But I think at the same time, we little by little understand that the geopolitical concerns will not just simply move away. We have new questions about strategic autonomy, about the control on value chains and raw materials. So even in a low carbon future, energy security is still a concern. And perhaps we can just add that today, with the energy price crisis, we also have a reminder that during the transition, we have to manage risks because for some time, maybe a decade or more, we'll have this dependency on fossil fuels, plus these new questions about the low carbon future and the new geopolitics of clean energy. So yeah, maybe security of supply has always been on the agenda, but it will stay very high in terms of priority, I think.
Energy efficiency has to kick in here as well, because the energy security concept is not only about how and where from we do get our energy resources, but also how we do consume or do not consume it. And so it's both on the demand and supply side. Kira, what's your take?
Yeah, if we talk about climate security, of course, I think the main objective here is to keep humanity in the safe operating space of planet Earth, of a climate that is relatively stable. And our current consumption patterns of energy, in particular of fossil fuels, they risk that we kind of catapult ourselves out of the safe operating space. Of course, we need energy for development, for living well, so to say, and we need energy security. And as Carole also pointed out, there's big questions about energy autonomy out there. We are interdependent with various countries, with various actors. Not all of them are uncomplicated, so to say. So I think there is also a big chance to kind of democratize the access to energy by switching to renewable energy. But I completely agree that we have a decade ahead of us that will require a rapid upscaling of innovation and the upscaling of efforts to really secure this transition. We have to do it once because of the risks of climate change that are threatening our economies on very different levels. But we also should do it for other reasons. For example, for the health effects, the local and immediate health effects that, for example, coal-fired power plants pose to us. Maybe a last sentence to kind of widen the scope a little bit. This next decade also goes hand in hand with ensuring that people across the globe have access to basic energy, right? So basic renewable energy also. So we have still a lot of people who are not connected to any grid. So we shouldn't forget about these populations, while we're also concerned with our own problems, which are also very demanding, such as the energy crisis.
Thank you, Kira. And of course, we all understand that climate issues span across borders of the European Union. And it's not just the climate issues and renewable energy is about the European Union. It's about the global situation in the energy system, in the climate system. So obviously, climate security affects many other things and has the potential to have many negative consequences, like internal displacement of persons, cross-border migration, unusually high rates of migration, etc. So drafts, etc. So indeed, when we speak about energy security, I think you're right. It's not only about the supply of energy. It's also it's a much broader concept. But our third panelist here comes in, Edmunds. You as a Riga City Councillor, Riga is placed on quite a big river. Close to its estuary, with 50% of the country's population. Do you think that the inhabitants of Riga as a capital city of the country might also somehow be subjected to these negative effects of stemming from insufficient climate and energy security?
Well, definitely. Actually, we are a bit lucky in maybe quote marks because Jelgava is actually one of the lowest cities, although it's further down, but definitely Riga is also one of the coastal cities, and maybe some areas are better protected, but for some areas there's definitely this unpredictability, how much can we develop and how much in adaptation we have to invest. And generally, maybe to connect these issues, I think there has been a hidden and, you could say, undervalued value in the basis of our prosperity, and that has been the stability. And that is the value that's been eroded by the climate crisis, and that affects almost every sort of area of decision making, both the security, even such things as investments are very much based on being able to make predictions. And if there's no stability, which more and more emissions lead to, and which climate crisis somewhat erodes, then you are somewhat limited in instruments you make. Even in a very practical case, insulating and refurbishing your home, you need to at least somewhat predict what the winter weather is going to be, and such simple questions lead to larger questions where, of course, we are losing that predictability and stability, and that, of course, also threatens the security of our future.
Thank you. That's a very good point indeed. In fact, I think we all agree that one thing that we can do in terms of improving our climate and energy security is to influence our behavior, at least, or change our behavior. So on the demand side, it is in our power to do something every day, every hour. So we can consume less energy, less fossil energy, or we can use energy, the same volume of energy, to do more in a way, so be more efficient in this way. Of course, these things are on one hand abstract, on the other hand they are very specific, and this is quite interesting when it comes to formulating policies. Since the policies are the way, formulating policies and choosing policy instruments is the way how we actually materialize our good intentions, and when we're trying to bridge the intention-action gap, where we can have good intentions towards the environment and climate, we strongly believe that it's important to work on the climate impact mitigation, on the mitigation of human impact on the climate change. But on the other hand, it does not always result in action. So we have to somehow formulate these policies, adopt laws, directives, regulations, and also implement those. But there is one problem indeed. If we look at the EU, there's a variety of countries indeed, and the spectrum of opinions on climate and energy issues is really, really vast. And these opinions change from country to country, depending mostly on the energy portfolio of these countries. And of course, it's not difficult to observe that climate and energy issues and opinion about these two things, which are actually one thing, to be honest, that there's a variety of opinions. I'd rather dare to say that there's quite a zoo of opinions within the EU. Kira, would you comment the perspective on these variety of opinions? I know that Germany, of course, is one of the pioneers towards in energy transition, but it is always there are also groups which criticize that we are taking too much, putting too much pressure on our shoulders regarding these changes. What's your take on it?
I mean, all European countries and basically the countries around the world have agreed to a common goal, actually. So we have one common goal, which is to keep global mean temperatures well below 2 degrees and preferably to a rise in mean temperatures to 1.5 degrees. And this immediately means also a transition to renewable energies, because we don't have any other option to achieve these goals than to reduce the releasing of CO2 into the atmosphere. So I think therefore we have a common goal, how we will get there. And of course, this in the European Union is then also also includes the Fit for 55 package. So another emissions reduction target that we are obliged to achieve. And so how we will get there is then a question of each individual member state. And I think also Germany could do a lot more to have a more rapid transition to clean energy. For example, a quicker exit from coal because of its severe and extremely costly external costs, so to say, that are not priced into the current energy price. So I think phasing out of coal energy production by 2030 is reasonable in the case of Germany. Of course, within Europe, there are different challenges and different setups for energy production. So I think we will not have one completely coherent strategy how everybody will produce their energy. This may also not be very useful because we have also different geographical circumstances where, for example, some countries are able to invest in wind and offshore wind much more, whereas others are better fit for solar energy. So I think this will have to be decided on the national level, but it's important to align all of our policies to the common goal that is agreed upon in the Paris Agreement, and in which the industrialized nations, and we belong to the industrialized nations in the European Union, have to take the more ambitious and early steps towards this transition.
Carole, building on what Kira just said, well, France is famous for its huge nuclear energy potential, and nuclear energy produces plenty of energy and it's CO2 neutral in a way, although there's a debate about the role of nuclear energy and how actually environmentally friendly it is. But do you think that given the variety of situations and energy portfolios in EU member states, do you think we can actually manage to adopt and implement a homogeneous, more homogeneous at least, EU energy and climate policy?
Well, yeah, I think in theory it's good that we have different choices. It's good that we have different demand patterns as well, and different energy mixes, because I mean, the core idea behind the internal energy market is that we will benefit from the complementarities between member states, and we will stimulate energy trading, and overall it will help us decarbonize and manage the cost increase for final customers. So that's the big promise, I think, behind the internal energy market project. So in theory, it should work well, and yeah, you mentioned the importance of nuclear in some countries. I mean, I don't want to get into the controversies. Perhaps it's our biggest disagreement in Europe today about the role of nuclear. About coal, clearly there's a destination, an agreement that it has to be phased out for several reasons, and the discussion is about the phase out dates, as Kira mentioned for Germany. Perhaps we can also say that we all agree that our dependency on gas is not sustainable. It does not fit with the carbon neutrality target. But our remaining disagreement is about the role of nuclear. All I can say is that today it's still 25% of our electricity production in Europe, and to some extent it's useful, I think, for Europe as a whole that France has such a high nuclear production that is low carbon. It's this dispatchable asset. At least it's a steady production profile, so it can be useful at times when the wind is not blowing enough in the North Sea or other factors. So the fact that we are different, I think, is a good point. But I fully understand that we have other disagreement on other aspects than the emission intensity of nuclear. But I mean, we'll see how it goes. There's a very heated debate over the green taxonomy. It's part of the game. It has always been the case in Europe. We don't necessarily agree on the right energy policy choices, but I think we have two commitments in common. We have the internal energy market, so we need to open competition, and we need to apply the same rules. And the second commitment, of course, is climate change. And I think that with these two commitments in mind, you have to ensure at least consistency between the national policies, and ensure that you discuss enough with your neighbors, because the choices that are made in one country will necessarily affect the neighbors.
Thank you, Carole. Edmunds, well, we've just heard two already opinions and comments on the variety of situations in Europe and possibility to exercise more homogeneous approach to these energy policies. From your perspective as a representative of a capital city which consumes plenty of heat every heating season, depending of course on the weather conditions, but that heating is produced predominantly from natural gas. And it actually plays a significant role in district heating, which is well developed, just like in quite a number of other big capital cities around Europe. So at least in the northern parts of Europe, wherever you have winters, do you think that it is possible to achieve a more homogeneous approach to this? And do you think we can get away, or rather start getting more rid of fossil fuels in our energy mix?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with the first question about the commonality of policies where it's possible. And I stressed in my first comment also this common value, which is, I think, uniting all the European countries and also the global countries, which is the stability. We really need stability for the future prosperity, for the security. And I think this is a value which can also just work to raise the ambition more and more for the sort of floor of ambitions for the countries. That's what we are speaking about, phasing out coal and other fossil fuels, like this value which is really common irrespective of individual interests, at least in the EU countries, should be exercised more to sort of force these agreements further. I think then what is also maybe strengthened at EU level is this also the differences where a lot of the countries actually are clearly just at least like rationally thinking they should be interested in changing the energy profiles as fast as possible. And of course, speaking from Latvia, which is one of the rare countries in the world which extracts zero fossil resources, generally increasing the energy security and actually reducing cost and reducing these kind of price shocks that we've seen is all in the national interests of the country. So I think what should be done is perhaps both at the national level and also at municipal level is to allow those actors who are willing to do more access to, for example, financial instruments and perhaps reducing some of the other obstacles to actually do more and bring the ambition forward. Now, speaking of Riga, yes, definitely, reducing the independence of natural gas and heating is one of the main priorities. We've actually seen that the municipalities in Latvia who are not using natural gas as a primary source in heating, they can actually pay much lower bills in this following winter that we're about to have. And there's a lot of financial incentives for the city to actually move quite swiftly to different energy resources, whether like modern technologies like heat pumps, or sometimes using the limited ways and understanding the issues there. Also the biomass heating, I think there's definitely a lot more potential. And just to give one example of what I talked about this, some of these obstacles, we are very much putting forward since a year in office a strategy to renovate the houses. So to actually drive down the consumption of energy, and there's a lot of potential that in Riga. But currently, actually, the financial instruments that municipalities have and that are organized at national levels are not sufficient, even at national level, to achieve the current national energy and climate plan in regards to renovating the buildings. We definitely need more borrowing-based financial instruments, which we know will pay off. They won't pay off in 15 years, they will pay off in perhaps 30, perhaps even more years, but definitely we don't need grants for that. We just need those who are willing to lend us the money for these sort of renovations to be able to do that, and municipality to be sort of like the actor who leads these change. And I think there are many issues like that in Europe where those actors who are willing to do more are sometimes limited by some, in the face of this crisis, really insignificant obstacles.
Oh, sure. Would we, Edmunds, say that European Green Deal is sort of a handbook for energy security and also for improving climate conditions or mitigating the human impact on climate?
Well, definitely. I think the experts here would have more to say about security part, but I think the European Green New Deal, with all the change in the narrative that it has brought, there's still some flaws in this side where the finance instruments and perhaps the other restrictions that, for example, member states have in their budget, there's still a lot more work to be done so that it's really all the instruments are in place to achieve these goals. Because definitely it is cheaper to invest now in mitigation than then have all the resources for adaptation, because adaptation costs are definitely going to exceed that if we are delayed in our actions.
Definitely. Kira, do you think a European Green Deal will be enough for us to, to make the giant leap for humanity in terms of what the EU can do and is able to do and is willing to do indeed?
Yeah, I think the European Green Deal was a huge step forward, and I think with this will come significant kind of pressure for innovation, which we also need to be able, as a union, also to remain competitive in an increasingly global, interconnected market, not only in energy but also with other goods and services we are competing. So I think it is really a promising way that it's not only, I think it's not only about energy security. It is about a common goal, as I mentioned earlier. But I think this Green New Deal also has the potential to give something to the European youth that is more of a new form of identity, you know, like a new vision for what Europe's future could look like. You know, it could be a future without combustion engines. It could be a future with, you know, silent, clean cities, with the better connections throughout Europe via trains. So I think this is really a beautiful vision that sometimes is hidden behind all these more technical aspects to it, which are of course extremely relevant. But I think also the question of what future does Europe's youth want is an important one. And I think it is deeply connected to the purpose of the European Green Deal.
Carole, do you want to add something on the ability of the European Green Deal to be the instrument for actually making this better progress towards climate and energy goals?
Yeah, I think maybe initially the Green Deal was not so much about security, and the key focus, I think, as Kira explained, was defining the kind of society that we want, responding to the calls from the youth, and also perhaps convincing the general population that climate action is in line with our economic interests, and that we would reinvent our prosperity model, our growth model, thanks to the Green Deal. So I think the focus was much more on the economic benefits and the economic rationale, but clearly I think that currently the energy independence, energy security aspects are making a comeback, and the European Commission reacted very quickly, in fact, to explain that behind the crisis, the main factors are not related to our climate policies. It's about the tensions on the gas market, and actually the Green Deal is our response to the current situation and to our vulnerability to the volatility of fossil fuels. But maybe we can also argue that if it's clearly the response for the long term, boosting renewables, investing much more in energy efficiency, we can have a conversation, we can have a debate over we are ready for the medium term, and whether the Green Deal is enough to cope with the risks and the new types of vulnerabilities that may arise in the coming decades. And that's why you see new debates about the way we organize our markets, the way we secure our gas supplies, and perhaps also the way we reform our carbon markets. So I think there are open questions, and we are just at the beginning of the negotiation of the Fit for 55 package. And perhaps it's a chance that we have the crisis today, because it's now that we can tackle all the blind spots of the EU Green Deal.
Right, so it looks like indeed we need, European Green Deal is more about the strategy, about the vision, about the future that we all are well striving for. We want a better future for ourselves, for those who will be living in this future after us, and well, it has to be cleaner. It has to be there has to be more green energy, less fossil fuel burning. So this will definitely benefit all those in the future. But well, it's very much about our behavior and change of behavior, and economic aspects, of course, are extremely powerful in influencing our behavior. And I'm personally quite afraid that the EU member states, but not exclusively the EU member states, also other countries globally, which are affected most by these high energy prices, be those electricity prices or prices of natural resources, energy resources, that this behavior might be well, somehow influenced in a negative way. We know that there are speculations that well, investment in green energy has brought us into this situation. If we had more fossil and more nuclear energy, we would not be facing this situation, because the wind blows. When the wind blows, we have cheap electricity. When it doesn't, well, then we don't have. So these are all, of course, this is an interesting discourse in the public space, and we cannot, of course, ignore that. So how do we change this? How do we motivate people to change the behavior? Obviously, is one of the key questions here. So we also understand that in this energy price situation that we have currently, situation related to climate issues and with nature and changes in nature has intertwined in a very, very bad way with geopolitical issues, which have already been referred to, regarding things which influence supply or manipulation rather of supply of fossil resources which are relevant for energy production, be it electricity or heat. So, but do you believe that rising fossil fuel prices will be enough or good enough a reason or motivator to switch over to green energy? Edmunds, you are nodding already.
Yes, I just thought, since I represent the local level, I could just give you a very simple example that for Riga, the heating costs of all the locally produced electricity has remained, of course, as low as they were. And what has increased the cost has been this external resources, the natural gas, of course. And I think with all the variability that renewable resources have, you would never have such an unpredictable and situation when the resource you're using is actually bought from abroad, and then brought from Russia, which definitely has its own interests. So I think there's a very clear case here that locality of the resources which renewables provide definitely gives more of security and also price stability than whatever that is affected by decisions outside of your borders and outside the borders of EU.
Thank you, Edmunds. Carole, do you think there is a way out of this pressure which the high energy prices is producing or creating on energy consumers? Which way will the policies sway? Do you think that there is a risk that governments will be tempted to remove or decrease the environmental levies and like excise tax and well, maybe feed-in tariff payments for some time? Do you see that there are some risks here on the table that we have to be careful with?
Yes, and I think what we need to avoid is simply panic. We are already seeing very strong reactions from member states. They are taking action at the national level, but they're also questioning some of the policies that are being implemented at the EU level, and that's what we clearly need to avoid. We need to look at things and have a very constructive discussion on what the problems are and what solutions can be found. I think the problem is that we need a gradual increase of fossil fuel prices, because it's what improves the investment case for renewables and for low carbon solutions. The problem is that we don't need sudden increases in fossil fuel prices, because it creates a panic, and it's and the governments are very concerned about the social and political implications, so they tend to overreact. So I think that's where we are, and ideally we would look at these issues in a collective way. I'm not saying that going to a renewables-based system is going to create havoc in the electricity system, but perhaps we can think a little bit more about our flexibility needs and make sure that we provide the right investment framework, the right regulation for new flexibility sources to emerge. I'm thinking of batteries, I'm thinking of interconnectors, other storage solutions, and demand side response in particular. And perhaps at the EU level, we need to have a closer look at all the new tools that are available that maybe could help us decrease our reliance on gas at a moment when we want to phase out coal, the priority, and at a moment where the renewables take off is still new, and we have a lot to learn from our own experience.
Kira, would you agree if I would say that this is actually a situation where we have to do quite the opposite thing to the one which is put forward? Well, we should decrease excise tax and prices on fossil fuels. I believe that this is the moment that we should probably even increase the costs of fossil fuels at this moment, thus making the investment in renewables energy even quicker, faster, and more affordable for those who are willing to invest, to spend their money, to invest their €1 into energy production. So where is the thin blue line, or thin red line, if you wish? So should we decrease or increase the costs of fossil fuels?
Well, first of all, we have to see that fossil fuels are costing us a lot already. So, and maybe these are not the costs that we think of, which is electricity costs, but as of now, we are indebting ourselves tremendously by releasing CO2 in the atmosphere and by causing extreme events that are extremely cost intensive, that are costing lives. We are ruining the planet for our children and grandchildren. So I think if we talk about costs, we cannot forget about this part, that we are indebting ourselves and that we are externalizing costs that should be included in the price of fossil fuels, because when we use them, there are negative effects which are maybe distanced in time and distanced in geography, but they are there and they are becoming more and more evident. I mean, nobody can ignore the changes that have happened over the last years. It's shocking to see the amount of damages we have been willing to accept. And let's not forget that we are in this crisis situation of being dependent on imported fossil fuels, be it gas, be it oil, because of many decades of inaction. Renewable energies have been on the table for several decades. And in all of this discussion, we should see that we could have been a lot further down the road. We could have reduced our dependency on fossil fuel energies, and we didn't. And this was because of, lobbying and because of political reluctance to make changes towards this way. And the prices we are paying now are related to this. So I think this is important to get this. So the prices are already very high, the costs are high, that society is bearing for this, and especially societies around the tropical belt, around the equator, where we have temperature extremes that are incomparable to what we are witnessing in Europe. So yeah, I think we should cut the subsidies we have in fossil fuels, and this will increase the prices. Of course, this is necessary because the subsidies that we are paying for with our taxes are eventually harming, our future. So I think this is important, but of course we need solutions that protect those who are not able to afford a higher energy bill. So I think that there are solutions on the table that will make it possible for especially poor households that don't have a high consumption of energy, but for whom even an incremental increase in energy prices is devastating. I think we need solutions for these households. And I think this is where we need to shift the debate.
Thank you very much for your intervention. I think it sounds like a very nice outro to our today's podcast. But to wrap up our discussion, what would be like 3 keywords you would use if you would have to describe, well, the future of energy in the context of climate and energy security? Edmunds.
Well, that's a tough task.
I know.
I'm still thinking, but definitely I would prefer. I can't put it in a keyword, but what I'm trying to say is that I can't put like one word that describes the
yes,
respect or just preservance of the systems. Like that has to be like a fundamental part with energy systems, because if you don't have stability there, then in all of the rest of the areas of life we are going to feel it, and the costs are going to be there. But if you can think of an adjective that describes
resilience, maybe, perhaps.
Well, you could say that, yes. Something that preserves the resilience, yes.
All right, Carole, what about you?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have 3 words, but I think that predictability would help in all situations. We need higher fossil fuel prices, but it would be good if they were predictable. And we need predictability for the investment framework in low carbon solutions. So I think it would help. And I think that's what the Green Deal is about, and the Fit for 55. It's about, securing the framework for the next decade and making sure we're in line with the carbon neutrality trajectory.
Thank you, Carole. And last but not least, Kira.
Yeah, I had the longest time, so I wrote down just 3 words. I wrote down strong European partners.
Fantastic. I think it's a very, very, very important note and emphasis here, as it looks like we are not going to be able to achieve significant changes and transformation if we do not work together. So teamwork it be, and the future is most likely green. So with these words, I'd like to thank once again 3 guests for this podcast. Carole Mathieu, Head of EU Policies, Center for Energy and Climate, the French Institute of International Relations. Thank you, Carole. Kira Vinke, Head of Center for Climate and Foreign Policy, German Council on Foreign Relations, and she's also a scientist at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. Thank you, Kira. And Edmunds Cepurītis, Councillor at the Riga City Council and Head of Committee on Housing and Environment. Thank you, Edmunds. And once again, thank you for listening to this wonderful broadcast. It's, of course, the time flew by quite quickly, but please spread the word about the series of these broadcasts, not only about the climate and energy issues, but also about other issues related to our future security. Thank you from myself, Reinis Āboltiņš, energy expert and researcher at the Riga Technical University. Enjoy.